October 14, 1943, 27,000 feet above Schweinfurt, Germany. Second Lieutenant Chuck Yeager's finger hovers over the gun trigger. Through his gun sight, a Focke-Wulf Fw 190 fills his vision, gray-green camouflage, black crosses on the wings, propeller spinning at 2,700 RPM just 200 yards ahead. His squadron leader's voice echoes in his headset from 15 minutes earlier. "Yeager, this is your first mission. Stay on my wing. Observe only. Do not engage unless directly attacked. Acknowledge." "Acknowledge, sir." But the Fw 190 isn't attacking Yeager. It's lining up on a crippled B-17 bomber, 10 American airmen barely keeping their shot up flying Fortress Airborne. The German pilot is focused, professional, setting up for the kill shot that will send the bomber spiraling into German countryside below. Yeager has a choice: follow orders, observe, learn, survive his first mission, or squeeze the trigger and enter combat against one of the Luftwaffe's most dangerous fighters, flown by a pilot with months or years of experience, while Yeager has exactly 0 combat hours. The decision takes less than a second. He fires. What happened in the next 43 minutes would become one of the most extraordinary combat debuts in aviation history. A rookie pilot, explicitly ordered not to fight, would shoot down 6 Focke-Wulf Fw 190s in his first combat mission, achieving instant ace status and rewriting the rulebook on what untested pilots could accomplish. This is the story of how natural ability, aggressive instinct, and exceptional aircraft combined to create a legend on the very first day of combat. It's about the moment when doctrine met reality, when just observe became impossible, and when one pilot proved that sometimes the best training is no substitute for raw talent under fire. By October 1943, the air war over Europe had reached a critical intensity. American B-17 and B-24 bombers were flying deep into German territory, striking industrial targets that fed the Nazi war machine. But these daylight bombing raids came at a horrific cost. German fighters, particularly the new Focke-Wulf Fw 190, were slaughtering bomber formations with devastating efficiency. The 8th Air Force was hemorrhaging aircraft and crews. On August 17, 1943, just 2 months before Yeager's first mission, a raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg cost 60 bombers destroyed and 600 airmen killed or captured in a single day. The bomber crews called it Black Thursday. Fighter escorts were supposed to protect the bombers. But in October 1943, American fighters lacked the range to accompany bombers all the way to targets deep in Germany. There was a gap, a deadly zone where bombers flew alone, and German fighters attacked with impunity. The P-38 Lightning could escort bombers 520 miles from England. The P-47 Thunderbolt managed 475 miles with drop tanks. But industrial targets in southern Germany were 650-plus miles from English bases. That 175-mile gap was a killing field. Fighter squadrons needed pilots, experienced, skilled, capable of matching the Luftwaffe's veterans. But the training pipeline couldn't keep pace with combat losses. By late 1943, replacement pilots were arriving in England with barely 200 hours of flight time, sometimes less. Most had never fired their guns at a moving target, never experienced the disorientation of high-G combat, never felt the terror of an enemy fighter attacking from their blind spot. The statistics were grim. New pilots had a 50% chance of being killed or captured within their first 5 combat missions. Those who survived the first 5 had much better odds, but that initial gauntlet was brutal. Fighter squadron commanders developed a doctrine: new pilots should observe during their first missions. Stay on your flight leader's wing. Watch how combat develops. Learn the patterns, the speeds, the geometry of aerial warfare. Don't engage unless you have no choice. It was a survival strategy based on harsh experience. Green pilots who tried to fight on their first missions usually died. Better to watch, learn, and live to fight another day when you understood what you were facing. Chuck Yeager was one of these green pilots. 20 years old from Hamlin, West Virginia, he'd arrived in England in November 1942 as part of the 363rd Fighter Squadron, 357th Fighter Group. He'd logged 270 hours of flight time, respectable but not exceptional. His gunnery scores were good. His aerobatics were solid. But he'd never seen combat, never faced an enemy who was actively trying to kill him. His squadron commander gave him the standard brief: First mission, you observe. Stay on your element leader's wing. Do not break formation. Do not chase targets. We need you alive and learning, not dead and heroic. But on October 14th, 1943, during the second Schweinfurt raid, that doctrine would collide with reality in a way that would change combat pilot training forever. To understand why a rookie pilot could achieve what Yeager did, we need to understand the desperate situation American fighter pilots faced in late 1943, and why the Luftwaffe's Focke-Wulf Fw 190 had become the most feared fighter in European skies. 1943, the 8th Air Force was bleeding to death. Every daylight bombing mission over Germany cost aircraft and crews at rates that couldn't be sustained. The strategic bombing campaign, designed to cripple German industry, was failing not because the bombs missed their targets, but because too many bombers never made it home. The mathematics were brutal. A typical heavy bomber group flew with 36 aircraft. Average losses per mission: 5-7 bombers destroyed, 15-20 damaged. Each bomber carried 10 men. That meant 50-70 airmen killed or captured per mission, plus another 150-200 wounded. Fighter escorts helped, but only when they could reach the target. In October 1943, the P-47 Thunderbolt, the primary American escort fighter, could accompany bombers 475 miles from England with drop tanks. Targets beyond that range flew unescorted. The gap created a killing zone. German fighters would wait beyond escort range, then attack bomber formations with overwhelming force. The Luftwaffe knew exactly where American escorts had to turn back, and they positioned their fighters accordingly. But the crisis wasn't just about range, it was about pilot experience. Fighter squadrons needed 50-60 pilots per group to maintain operational strength. Combat losses, accidents, and medical casualties created constant demand for replacements. The training pipeline in the United States was producing pilots quickly, but quantity came at the cost of quality. In 1941, fighter pilot training took 18 months and produced pilots with 400-plus flight hours. By 1943, the program was compressed to 9 months with pilots graduating at 200-250 hours. They knew how to fly, but they didn't know how to fight. The Luftwaffe, meanwhile, fielded pilots with 501,000 hours of experience, including extensive combat time on the Eastern Front. They knew every tactic, every trick, every mistake inexperienced pilots made, and they exploited that knowledge ruthlessly. American squadron commanders faced an impossible dilemma. They needed pilots in the cockpit immediately. Losses were too high to wait for ideal training. But throwing green pilots into combat resulted in catastrophic casualties. The solution was the observe first doctrine. New pilots flew their initial missions with one instruction: stay on your leader's wing and watch. Learn how experienced pilots positioned themselves, how they scanned for threats, how they communicated, how they managed energy and ammunition. Don't engage unless attacked directly. Don't break formation chasing targets. Don't try to be a hero on day one. The doctrine worked, sort of. Pilots who followed it survived their first missions at higher rates. But survival meant passivity. It meant watching bombers get shot down without intervening. It meant letting enemy fighters escape rather than pursuing them. Every experienced fighter pilot knew the doctrine was a compromise between ideal training and brutal reality. They also knew that somewhere in their squadron was a pilot with natural talent, someone who didn't need 20 missions to learn the patterns, who could see the geometry of combat instinctively. But identifying that pilot before throwing them into combat was impossible, so everyone started with observe only. Chuck Yeager was about to prove that sometimes doctrine needs to be broken on the first day. However, the real story was just beginning, because the aircraft Yeager would fly into combat and the enemy he would face were about to collide in a way that would test every assumption about experience versus natural ability. Charles Elwood Yeager didn't fit the fighter-pilot stereotype. Born in Hamlin, West Virginia in 1923, he grew up during the Depression in Appalachian poverty. His father was a driller in the natural gas fields. His mother ran the household with iron discipline. The family had no aviation background, no military tradition, no obvious path to becoming a fighter pilot. Yeager's education ended with high school. He worked as a mechanic fixing equipment and engines, skills that would prove invaluable later. He had exceptional eyesight, rated 20/10, meaning he could see at 20 feet what normal vision saw at 10 feet. That genetic advantage was worth more than any training. He enlisted in the Army Air Corps in September 1941, 3 months before Pearl Harbor, as an aircraft mechanic. His plan was to work on engines, not fly them. But in July 1942, the Air Corps opened pilot training to enlisted men. Previously, only officers could become pilots. Yeager applied immediately. His mechanical knowledge, his eyesight, and his instinctive understanding of how machines worked made him a natural candidate. Flight training began at Tuskegee Army Airfield in Alabama. Primary training in Stearman PT-17 biplanes, learning basic flight navigation aerobatics. Advanced training in AT-6 Texans, faster, more powerful, closer to actual fighters. Gunnery training in California, learning to track moving targets, compensate for ballistics, manage trigger discipline. He wasn't the best pilot in his class. His aerobatics were good but not exceptional. His instrument flying was adequate, but his gunnery scores were outstanding. He could track targets with uncanny accuracy, his eye-hand coordination translating into consistently tight shot groups. Yeager graduated in March 1943 with his pilot wings and commission as flight officer, a rank between enlisted and officer created specifically for the enlisted pilot program. He was assigned to P-39 Airacobras initially, but the 357th Fighter Group was forming with P-51 Mustangs, and he transferred before deployment. In November 1943, he shipped to England. The 357th Fighter Group was based at RAF Leston, flying combat missions over occupied Europe. The squadron operated P-51B Mustangs, the long-range escort fighter that would eventually solve the bomber protection crisis. But in October 1943, when Yeager arrived, the P-51B was still new. Most missions flew with P-47 Thunderbolts. The 357th was working up to operational status, integrating new pilots, establishing procedures. Yeager was assigned to the 363rd Fighter Squadron. His squadron commander, Captain Clarence "Bud" Anderson, looked at the roster of replacement pilots and saw what every commander saw: young, inexperienced, untested. "You'll fly your first mission when we have an escort assignment that allows observation time," Anderson told him. "Your job is simple. Stick to your element leader like glue. Watch everything. Learn everything. Engage only if directly attacked. Understand?" "Yes, sir." "I mean it, Yeager. I don't need dead heroes. I need pilots who survive long enough to become useful. First mission is for learning, not fighting." Yeager nodded. The briefing made sense. He'd heard the stories about replacement pilots getting killed their first time out. Better to be cautious, observant, patient. But you won't believe what happened during his first mission. Because the second Schweinfurt raid would present situations where just observe became impossible, and Yeager's natural instincts would override every instruction he'd received. The Focke-Wulf Fw 190 was a killer. When it first appeared over France in August 1941, RAF pilots thought they were hallucinating. The Fw 190 was faster than their Spitfire MKVs, climbed better, dove better, and carried heavier armament. For the first time since 1940, German fighters had decisive superiority over British aircraft. Kurt Tank, Focke-Wulf's chief designer, had created something revolutionary. While most fighters used inline engines, Tank chose the massive BMW 801 radial, 14 cylinders producing 1,700 horsepower. The radial engine was heavier but more reliable, more durable, and critically, nearly impossible to disable with single hits. The Fw 190's performance was exceptional. Maximum speed, 408 miles per hour at 20,000 feet. Climb rate, 2,350 feet per minute. Service ceiling, 37,400 feet. It could outperform almost anything the Allies fielded in 1941-1943. But performance was only part of the threat. The Fw 190's armament was devastating: 4 20mm 151 cannons and 2 13 machine guns. When all weapons fired simultaneously, they delivered 7.5 pounds of explosives per second. A 1-second burst could disintegrate a fighter or cripple a bomber. German pilots loved it. Compared to the Messerschmitt Bf 109, their previous primary fighter, the FW-190 was easier to fly, more forgiving, more stable as a gun platform. The wide-track landing gear made takeoffs and landings safer. The cockpit visibility was excellent. The controls were responsive but not twitchy. The FW-190 could dogfight, but its real strength was speed. Luftwaffe tactics evolved around hit-and-run attacks, dive on the target at high speed, fire a devastating burst, then extend away before escorts could respond. The bomber's defensive guns couldn't track fast enough, and pursuing fighters couldn't catch the FW-190 in a dive. By October 1943, the FW-190 equipped the majority of day fighter units defending German airspace. Jagdgeschwader 1, JG-2, JG-26, JG-54, the elite units, all flew FW-190s. Their pilots had years of combat experience and aircraft that gave them every tactical advantage. American bomber crews feared the FW-190 more than any other German aircraft. The Bf-109 was dangerous but fragile. A good burst of .50 caliber fire could disable it. The FW-190 absorbed punishment and kept fighting. Bomber gunners reported hitting FW-190s repeatedly and watching them continue their attacks, seemingly invulnerable. The psychological impact was significant. American fighter pilots knew they were facing superior aircraft flown by experienced pilots. The only advantages were numbers and the P-47's ability to dive away from trouble. But in turning combat, the FW-190 dominated. This was the threat environment Chuck Yeager entered in October 1943. The FW-190 wasn't just an enemy fighter. It was the measuring stick by which German air superiority was maintained. Encountering one required experience, discipline, and excellent aircraft handling. Or so everyone believed. Stay with me because this next part is crucial. The mission that would test Yeager was the second Schweinfurt raid, one of the bloodiest days in 8th Air Force history. October 14, 1943, 4:30 hours, RAF Leston briefing room. 60 fighter pilots filled the wooden benches, faces shadowed in the pre-dawn darkness. At the front, Major Thomas Hayes stood beside a large map of Germany. A red ribbon stretched from England across the North Sea, over occupied Netherlands, deep into southern Germany. Gentlemen, today's target is Schweinfurt, ball-bearing factories. The entire 1st Bombardment Division, 291 B-17s. We know this target. We hit it 2 months ago and lost 60 bombers. The Luftwaffe knows we're coming back, and they'll defend it with everything they have. Hayes traced the route with his pointer. The bomber stream will cross the Dutch coast at 900 hours, proceed south-southeast toward the target. Fighter escort responsibilities. P-47 groups will cover initial penetration and withdrawal. Our group, 357th, will provide escort from Dutch border to maximum range approximately here. He tapped the map, 150 miles short of Schweinfurt. That's right, we cannot reach the target. The bombers will be unescorted for approximately 40 minutes inbound and 40 minutes outbound. 8th Air Force knows this. The bombers know this. The Luftwaffe definitely knows this. Silence in the room. Every pilot understood what that meant. The bomber crews would face German fighters with no protection during the most critical phase of the mission. Our job is to keep German fighters off the bombers as long as possible and to meet them on the way back. Expect heavy enemy activity. Intelligence estimates 200-plus German fighters will engage. FW-190s from JG-1 and JG-26, plus Bf-109s from multiple units. Hayes consulted his notes. Formation assignments, we're putting up 48 aircraft in 12 four-plane flights. Captain Anderson will lead red flight. Lieutenant Morrison, you'll lead white flight. Lieutenant Yeager. Yeager straightened on the bench. You'll fly as Red 4, tail-end Charlie position. This is your first combat mission. Your orders are explicit. Maintain formation, stay visual with Red 3, observe only. Do not engage unless directly attacked. Acknowledge. Yes, sir, acknowledged. I mean it, Yeager. Your job today is to survive and learn. We're not looking for heroes on first missions. We're looking for pilots who make it to their second mission. Clear. Clear, sir. The briefing continued with technical details. Frequencies, recognition signals, emergency procedures, rendezvous points. The weather officer reported excellent conditions, Clear skies, unlimited visibility, light winds. Perfect flying weather, which also meant perfect conditions for German fighters to engage. The intelligence officer added grim statistics. Based on previous Schweinfurt raids, we expect 15–20% bomber losses. That's 4,458 aircraft. Your job is to reduce that number. Every bomber you protect is 10 American lives saved. After the briefing, pilots filed out toward their aircraft. Yeager walked beside his element leader, Lieutenant Ed Simpson. "Tail end Charlie on your first mission," Simpson said. "That's a rough draw. You'll be watching our six the whole time. Eyes on a swivel, call out any contacts you see." "Understood." And Yeager, the old man, meant what he said. "Just observe today. The FW-190s are no joke. They'll eat inexperienced pilots alive. Let the veterans handle the fighting." Yeager nodded, but as he approached his P-51B Mustang, tail number 413,926, he felt something different than the nervousness he expected. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. The pre-flight checks came automatically. He'd trained for this moment for 18 months. Now it was real. However, what happened next shocked everyone. Because within 2 hours, Yeager's observe-only mission would turn into the most extraordinary combat debut in 8th Air Force history. 8:57 hours, 27,000 feet over the Netherlands. Red Flight maintained formation 2,000 feet above the bomber stream. 48 P-51s spread across the sky in loose defensive positioning. Below, 291 B-17 flying fortresses droned eastward in tight combat boxes, their contrails marking the sky like chalk lines. Yeager flew tail end Charlie, scanning constantly. Left, right, above, below, behind. The vulnerability of the position was obvious. If German fighters attacked from behind, he'd see them first and be their first target. "Red Flight, Bandits 11 o'clock high, Angels 30. Captain Anderson's voice, calm and professional. Yeager looked left and up. Small dots at 30,000 feet, maybe 20 aircraft, positioning themselves above the bomber stream. Classic bounce setup. "Red Flight, maintain position. They're probing, looking for gaps." The German fighters, FW-190s by their silhouette, made a single pass at the lead bomber element, then climbed away. Testing defenses, drawing reaction, looking for inexperienced pilots who would break formation to chase. Red Flight held position. Discipline won these fights. At 9:15 hours, the P-47 escorts reached maximum range and turned back. 48 Thunderbolts peeling away, leaving the bomber stream with only the 357th Fighter Group for protection. Red Flight, multiple bandits inbound, 3 o'clock level. Count 15, repeat 15 contacts. Yeager spotted them, FW-190s in loose formation, 4,000 yards out and closing. They weren't probing anymore. This was a coordinated attack on the rear bomber elements. Red Flight engaging, stay tight. The FW-190s split into 3 plane elements, each targeting a different bomber. The geometry developed quickly, German fighters diving, American escorts turning to intercept, bombers maintaining formation. One FW-190 broke through the defensive screen. He was good, experienced, using speed to slash through the escort cordon. His target, a B-17 trailing the formation, number 3 engine feathered, struggling to maintain altitude. Yeager watched the FW-190 line up. 2 seconds until firing range. The B-17's gunners were tracking but couldn't get lead on the fast-moving target. Captain Anderson was engaging another fighter 3,000 yards away. Simpson was covering Anderson's 6. The other elements were committed. Nobody was positioned to save that bomber. Yeager made his decision. He broke formation, rolled inverted, and dove. "Red 4 braking," he called, more notification than request. The FW-190 filled his gun sight. Range, 300 yards and closing. The German pilot was focused on the bomber, hadn't seen Yeager's diving attack. Yeager's thumb found the trigger. 6.50 caliber machine guns, 1,800 rounds loaded, bore sighted for 300 yards. He fired. But here's where it gets interesting, because that first burst did more than just save one bomber. The FW-190 disintegrated. Yeager's burst hit perfectly, rounds walking from the engine cowling back through the cockpit. The German fighter's canopy exploded. The left wing folded upward. The aircraft snapped into a violent spin, pieces tumbling away. First kill, first mission, first 10 minutes of combat. But Yeager didn't have time to process it. Two more FW-190s were positioning on another straggling bomber, working as a team, one drawing gunner attention while the other attacked from the opposite side. He pulled out of his dive, climbed back to the bomber's altitude, and headed toward the second FW-190. The German pilot saw him coming and broke away from his attack, turning to face Yeager head-on. Head-to-head merge at 600 miles per hour combined closure. Both pilots fired simultaneously. Yeager's rounds hit first. The FW-190's propeller disintegrated. The engine cowling peeled back. The German pilot pulled up violently, trying to avoid collision, but his aircraft was already dying. Two down. Red 4, where the hell are you? Captain Anderson's voice, sharp with concern. Engaging bandits on the stragglers, sir. Get back in formation. But Yeager was committed now. A third FW-190 was making a high-side attack on a B-17 at the edge of the formation. Yeager pulled hard into a climbing turn, cutting off the German's angle. The FW-190 pilot saw him and tried to extend away, using speed to escape. But the P-51 had speed too. Yeager closed to 200 yards, centered the Pipper, and fired a long burst. Hits on the wing route. The FW-190's left wing separated completely. The aircraft rolled violently and fell away. 3 kills, 12 minutes of combat. The remaining German fighters broke off, scattering. They'd lost 3 aircraft in rapid succession to what they thought was a milk run against crippled bombers. The tactical calculus changed. This section of the bomber stream had aggressive escort. Yeager climbed back toward Red Flight's position. His ammunition counters showed 600 rounds remaining. He'd burned through 1,200 rounds in 3 engagements. His hands were steady. His breathing was controlled. The adrenaline was there, but it sharpened rather than clouded his thinking. Red 4 rejoined formation. Anderson's voice calmer now, and we're having a conversation when we land. Yes, sir. But the mission wasn't over. The bomber stream was 80 miles from Schweinfurt, still 40 minutes from the target. And intelligence reports were wrong. The German fighters weren't finished. At 9:45 hours, the second wave appeared. 30 FW-190s, fresh from forward airfields, diving on the bomber formation from 33,000 feet. This is where things took a dramatic turn, because Yeager was about to prove that his first 3 kills weren't luck. The German attack was coordinated and professional. 30 FW-190s split into 10 3-plane elements, each targeting a different bomber. Simultaneous attacks from multiple angles, front, beam, high, low, overwhelming the defensive response. Red Flight turned into the attack. 12 fighters against 30, disadvantage, but manageable if discipline held. Yeager spotted 3 FW-190s setting up on a bomber in the lower element. They were using the sun, diving from 10 o'clock high with the sun behind them, making visual acquisition difficult. He didn't ask permission this time. He rolled and dove to intercept. The lead FW-190 was 400 yards from firing position when Yeager closed to 250 yards behind him. He fired a 2-second burst. The FW-190's tail section disintegrated. The aircraft pitched down violently, out of control. 4. The wingman saw Yeager and broke hard left, trying to get into turning combat where the FW-190's maneuverability advantage would count. But Yeager didn't follow the turn. Instead, he pulled vertical, using the P-51's energy retention to climb above the fight. The FW-190 pilot made a mistake. He reversed his turn, trying to track Yeager's climb. It bled his energy. When Yeager rolled over the top and dove back down, the German fighter was slow, vulnerable. Yeager fired from high deflection, a difficult shot requiring lead and prediction. His rounds converged ahead of the FW-190's flight path. The German flew into the stream of fire, hits across the cockpit and wing. The aircraft rolled inverted and fell away streaming smoke. 5. A status, 28 minutes of combat, first mission. The third FW-190 in the element saw both wingmen destroyed and broke off the attack, diving away at full throttle. Yeager started to pursue, but Captain Anderson's voice cut through. Red 4, break off and rejoin. We're at max range. Yeager checked his fuel gauge. Anderson was right. They were at maximum escort range. The bombers would continue alone to Schweinfurt. The fighters had to turn back or risk running out of fuel over Germany. Red Flight formed up and turned west. Around them, other P-51s were reforming, heading home. The bomber stream continued east, alone now, toward the target and the heaviest German defenses. But Yeager's combat wasn't finished. At 10:45 hours, heading west over the Netherlands, Red Flight encountered a formation of 6 FW-190s returning from attacking the bombers. The Germans were low on fuel and ammunition, heading back to their bases. They tried to avoid combat, turning north. Anderson made the call. Red Flight were engaging. They're damaged and low on gas. The dogfight lasted 4 minutes. Red Flight destroyed 3 German fighters. Yeager got the 6th. He came at the FW-190 from below and behind, a difficult angle but perfect positioning. The German pilot was focused on escaping, didn't see the threat until Yeager opened fire at 150 yards. The burst hit the engine and cockpit. The FW-190 nosed down, trailing fire. 6 confirmed kills. First combat mission, 43 minutes of actual combat time. You won't believe what happened during the landing and debriefing. 11:47 hours, RAF Leston. Red Flight touched down with fuel tanks nearly empty. Yeager's P-51 had 15 gallons remaining, maybe 10 minutes of flight time. He taxied to the hardstand, shut down the engine, and sat in the cockpit for 30 seconds, processing what had just happened. 6 kills, the number seemed impossible. His crew chief climbed onto the wing. "Lieutenant, what happened up there? Your gun barrels are burned out, your ammo's gone, and we're counting." He walked along the wing, examining the gun ports. 6 victory marks needed. "Is that confirmed, sir?" 6. 6 FW-190s confirmed destroyed. The crew chief whistled. "On your first mission, sir, that's unprecedented." Yeager climbed out and walked toward the debriefing room. Other pilots from Red Flight were already gathering, their expressions ranging from amazement to disbelief. Captain Anderson stood with his arms crossed. His face was unreadable. "Yeager, my office now." The debriefing room fell silent. Every pilot watched as Yeager followed Anderson into the squadron commander's office and closed the door. Anderson sat behind his desk. "Lieutenant, I gave you explicit orders. Observe only, stay in formation. Do not engage unless directly attacked. You violated every instruction I gave you." "Yes, sir." "You broke formation 6 times. You engaged superior numbers alone. You disobeyed direct orders to return to formation. Give me one reason why I shouldn't ground you permanently." Yeager met his commander's eyes. "Sir, I couldn't watch those bombers get shot down when I was in position to stop it." Anderson stared at him for 10 seconds. Then his expression shifted, not quite a smile, but close. 6 confirmed kills. Intelligence is verifying with bomber crews and gun camera footage, but preliminary reports confirm 6 FW-190s destroyed by a single P-51 matching your tail number. Anderson leaned back. "Do you understand what you did today?" "I engaged enemy aircraft, sir." "You achieved ace status on your first mission. Nobody has done that in this war. Nobody. The previous record was 3 kills on a first mission. You doubled it." Anderson stood and walked to the window. "The tactical problem is that you disobeyed orders. The practical reality is that you saved at least 3 bombers, 30 men who came home because you ignored what I told you." He turned back to Yeager. "Your gunnery was perfect. Your energy management was instinctive. Your tactical decisions were aggressive but correct. You have natural ability that most pilots never develop." "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet. You're still in trouble for disobeying orders, but I'm not grounding you. We need pilots who can do what you did today." Anderson paused. "Different orders for your next mission. Engage as needed. You've earned it." The official citation would come later. 6 FW-190s destroyed. October 14, 1943, 2nd Schweinfurt raid. Yeager's name went into the squadron record book with a notation. Unprecedented first mission performance. However, the real story was just beginning. because Yeager's combat career would continue with even more remarkable achievements. The North American P-51 Mustang was the weapon that made Yeager's performance possible. Without this aircraft, 6 kills on a first mission would have been impossible. The Mustang combined speed, range, maneuverability, and firepower in a way no other fighter matched. The P-51B variant Yeager flew that day was powered by the Packard V1653 engine, American-built version of the British Rolls-Royce Merlin. It produced 1,380 horsepower, driving a 4-bladed propeller that could push the aircraft to 440 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. That speed advantage over the FW-190 was marginal but critical. The German fighter could reach 408 mph, fast enough to dictate engagement terms in most situations. But the Mustang's extra 30 mph meant Yeager could choose when to fight and when to extend. In multiple engagements, that speed let him close on targets before they could escape. The Mustang's range was revolutionary. With drop tanks, it could escort bombers 850 miles from base, finally matching bomber radius and eliminating the unescorted gap that had made missions like Schweinfurt so deadly. But range and speed weren't the decisive advantages. The Mustang's handling characteristics gave Yeager the platform to express his natural ability. The controls were responsive but not oversensitive. The aircraft was stable in gun-tracking situations. The visibility from the bubble canopy was excellent. Yeager could see threats developing from any angle. The armament was devastating. 6.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, 3 per wing, with 1,880 total rounds. Each gun fired 800 rounds per minute. When all 6 fired together, they delivered nearly 100 pounds of projectiles per second at the target. Yeager's gunnery that day demonstrated perfect harmonization. The guns were bore-sighted to converge at 300 yards, the optimal range for deflection shooting. All 6 of his kills happened between 150 and 300 yards, the sweet spot where hitting power maximized and dispersion minimized. The gun camera footage, reviewed during debriefing, showed textbook marksmanship. Short bursts, 2 to 3 seconds maximum, rounds impacting center mass, no wasted ammunition chasing impossible shots. The FW-190 pilots Yeager faced were experienced and skilled, but they were flying aircraft designed in 1939, optimized for different tactical requirements. The Mustang represented 1943 technology, 4 years of iterative design improvement compressed into one airframe. In the hands of an average pilot, the P-51B was excellent. In Yeager's hands, it became legendary. Post-war analysis of that mission identified the key factors: natural talent, superior aircraft, and aggressive tactics against an enemy expecting passive observation from rookie pilots. The Luftwaffe had developed doctrine around American escort patterns. Experienced pilots engaged aggressively, rookies stayed passive. Yeager violated those expectations, creating tactical surprise that multiplied his effectiveness. But the P-51 was the foundation. Without that aircraft's performance envelope, Yeager's natural ability would have been insufficient against the FW-190's advantages. As the war progressed, the Mustang would continue to evolve. Better engines, improved variants, refined tactics. But the P-51B Yeager flew on October 14, 1943, was already the finest escort fighter in the European theater. Chuck Yeager's first combat mission changed fighter-pilot doctrine permanently. The observe-only policy for rookie pilots made tactical sense when most replacements were average. But Yeager proved that exceptional natural ability could overcome lack of experience, and that restricting talented pilots artificially was counterproductive. Within weeks, squadron commanders throughout the 8th Air Force revised their approach. New pilots still received cautionary briefings, but blanket, no engagement orders disappeared. Instead, flight leaders were authorized to assess rookie capability during early missions and adjust restrictions accordingly. Yeager continued flying combat. By war's end, he'd accumulated 11.5 confirmed victories, respectable but not exceptional by ace standards. His first mission remained his most successful single-day performance. On March 5, 1944, Yeager was shot down over France and evaded capture with French resistance help. He returned to England and continued operations. His combat career included 64 missions, numerous ground attack sorties, and one of the most remarkable survival stories of the war. But the October 14, 1943 mission defined him. 6 kills, first combat, against one of Germany's best fighters flown by experienced pilots. The performance was statistically unprecedented and has never been matched. Post-war, Yeager became a test pilot. On October 14, 1947, exactly 4 years after his first combat mission, he broke the sound barrier in the Bell X-1, becoming the first human to fly faster than sound. The date was coincidence, but the symmetry was poetic. The P-51 Mustang went on to become the dominant American fighter of World War II. Total production, 15,586 aircraft. Combat victories, 4,950 enemy aircraft destroyed in air combat. The aircraft Yeager flew, the P-51B, proved the concept that would win air superiority over Europe. The FW-190 remained dangerous throughout the war, but American numerical and technological advantages eventually overwhelmed German defenses. By 1945, Luftwaffe fighter operations had collapsed under unsustainable losses. Looking back, Yeager's first mission represented more than individual heroism. It demonstrated that doctrine must adapt to capability, that rules serve victory rather than defining it, and that natural talent, given the right aircraft, can achieve extraordinary results even without experience. The just observe policy wasn't wrong. For most pilots, it saved lives and built experience safely. But Yeager proved that exceptions exist and that commanders must recognize exceptional ability when they see it, even on day one. Today, Yeager's October 14, 1943 performance remains the gold standard for first mission success. Fighter pilot training includes his combat as a case study in natural ability, aggressive tactics, and the importance of superior equipment. 6 FW-190s destroyed, 0 friendly losses, 30 bomber crew members saved, first combat mission. Unprecedented then, unmatched since. So there you have it, the complete story of Chuck Yeager's first combat mission, and the day he achieved what no fighter pilot had ever accomplished. From just observe orders to 6 confirmed kills against the Luftwaffe's best fighter, this mission proved that natural talent combined with superior aircraft can overcome any disadvantage, even complete inexperience. Chuck Yeager went on to become one of aviation's greatest legends, test pilot, sound barrier breaker, and combat ace. But it all started on October 14, 1943, over Germany, when a rookie pilot decided that watching wasn't enough. What impressed you most about this incredible first mission? The 6 kills, the decision to disobey orders, the instinctive combat mastery on day one? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into World War II's most extraordinary combat missions and the pilots who flew them, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching WWII Aviation, and I'll see you in the next one.